31% of U.S. adults experience an anxiety disorder at some point in their lives. 18% of people are currently being treated for depression. It's statistics like these that is why Central Church in Sioux Falls hosted a mental health summit today. The summit set out with the goal of answering questions like, how can friends and family support someone who is struggling? And how can the church become a place where people battling mental health challenges feel safe?
We're created in a very complex manner, and so we're not just machines, we're not just bodies, but we're people with mind, body, and soul. Stuff happens. Like we're people are imperfect, and when life throws things at you, or when you have chemical issues, or whatever the issues are in your life, we need to approach that from a holistic manner.
In total, there were 7 speakers, and the theme of the conference was You're Never Alone.